Everyone expected the Alpha King to leave his enemy's bride behind. No one expected him to carry her home. The snow covered the northern valley like a blanket of endless white, hiding forgotten paths and silent secrets beneath its frozen surface. For most people, the storm was a warning to stay inside. But for the woman lying alone beneath the pale winter sky, the storm was only another reminder that no one was coming for her. Amelia Whitmore had stopped hoping for rescue hours ago. The wedding dress she once wore as a symbol of peace was now only a reminder of promises that had been broken. She had been sent into an alliance between two powerful werewolf families, believing her sacrifice could prevent conflict. She never asked for a crown. She never asked for influence. She only wanted both sides to find a reason to stop fighting. But when the alliance failed, she became the easiest person to blame. The daughter of an enemy family, the Omega no one wanted to protect. The bride everyone was willing to forget. As the cold wind moved through the valley, Amelia held onto the small piece of fabric wrapped around her hand. It was not valuable. It was not something anyone else would notice. But it carried a memory of the family she once loved and the hope she refused to lose. Even in the hardest moment of her life, Amelia did not think about revenge. She only wondered if somewhere in the world there was still a place where she could belong. Miles away, the northern patrol of the werewolf kingdom moved through the snow-covered land. At the front was Adrian Blackthorn, the Alpha King known throughout the realm for his strength, his discipline, and his ability to make impossible decisions. He had spent years protecting his kingdom from those who threatened its peace. And among those threats was the Whitmore family. To Adrian, the name represented years of conflict and broken trust. He had been taught that enemies could never become allies. He had been taught that mercy could become weakness. But that belief was about to be challenged. When his patrol discovered Amelia in the snow, everyone expected him to continue forward. After all, she belonged to the family his kingdom had long considered an enemy. Helping her could create questions, could create doubt, could change everything. Adrian looked at the woman before him and saw something the stories had never mentioned. He did not see an enemy. He saw someone who had been abandoned when she needed kindness the most. Amelia slowly opened her eyes and looked at the stranger standing nearby. She did not know his name. She did not know he was the Alpha King. She only whispered, "Why would you help someone like me?" Adrian had no answer at first. For years, he had believed every choice had to be made for the sake of power and protection. But in that moment he realized some choices were not about winning or losing. Some choices revealed who a person truly was. The Alpha King removed his cloak and placed it around her shoulders. A simple act. Quiet decision. Yet it was the first moment that changed the fate of two kingdoms. Because the woman everyone called his enemy was the first person who made him question everything he believed about strength, loyalty, and destiny. The journey back to the Northern Kingdom was quieter than anyone expected. The snow continued falling across the mountains, covering the road ahead as the Alpha King traveled beside the woman everyone believed should have remained his enemy. Amelia Whitmore stayed silent for most of the journey, unsure of what to think about the man who had chosen to help her. She had expected suspicion. She had expected questions about her family and the alliance that had failed. Instead, Adrian Blackthorn treated her with a respect she had almost forgotten existed. For Amelia, kindness from someone with power felt unfamiliar. She had spent years being reminded that her value came from what she could provide for others. As an Omega from a family surrounded by conflict, she was often seen as a symbol instead of a person. But Adrian did not look at her as a name, a title, or a political piece. He looked at her as Amelia. When they finally reached the royal residence, the reaction was immediate. The guards and advisors were shocked to see the Alpha King return with the bride of his enemy. Whispers moved through the halls, as people wondered why Adrian would bring someone connected to the Whitmore family into the heart of his kingdom. Some believed it was a mistake. Others believed there had to be a hidden reason behind his decision. Adrian heard every concern, but he did not allow their opinions to change what he knew. He had seen Amelia when no one else was watching. He had seen someone who remained gentle even after being abandoned. He had seen someone who had every reason to become bitter but chose compassion instead. Amelia noticed the uncertainty around her. She understood why people were cautious. If their positions were reversed, she might have felt the same. so she did not demand acceptance. She did not ask anyone to trust her immediately. She simply kept her head high and showed through her actions that she had no desire to bring harm to the kingdom. One evening, Adrian found Amelia standing near a large window overlooking the snowy lands. She looked distant, as if she was wondering whether she truly belonged there. "You regret saving me," she said quietly. Adrian looked surprised. "Why would you think that?" Amelia lowered her eyes. "Because every person here sees me as a reminder of the past." Adrian stood beside her and looked toward the kingdom below. "They see what they were taught to see. But I saw what happened in that snow." Amelia looked at him. "And what did you see?" Adrian answered honestly. "I saw someone who needed help, and I saw someone who deserved it." Those words stayed with her. For the first time in a long time, Amelia felt like someone was looking beyond the circumstances that surrounded her. Meanwhile, the royal council continued questioning Adrian's decision. They reminded him of old conflicts and warned him that trust was not easily given. But Adrian began asking questions of his own. If Amelia was truly the enemy they described, why had she shown more kindness than many people inside his own palace? Why had someone with so little still been willing to protect peace? The answers were becoming impossible to ignore. The Alpha King had brought his enemy's bride into his home, but he was beginning to realize something unexpected, perhaps the greatest. Danger was not the woman standing before him. Perhaps it was the hatred that had kept two sides apart for so long. And as winter continued outside the palace walls, a new chapter quietly began. The Omega who arrived as a stranger was slowly becoming the person who challenged everything the Alpha King thought he knew. The days that followed Amelia Whitmore's arrival at the Northern Kingdom Palace revealed a truth neither she nor Adrian Blackthorne expected. The walls that once represented power and distance slowly became a place where two very different worlds began to understand each other. Amelia knew she was being watched. Every step she took through the grand halls reminded her that many people still saw her as the enemy's bride. But instead of allowing their opinions to define her, she focused on the small things she could control. She greeted the palace workers with kindness. She listened when others spoke. She treated every person with the same respect, regardless of their position. Some servants were surprised by her actions. They had expected someone connected to an opposing family to act proud or demanding. Instead, they discovered an Omega who understood what it meant to feel unseen. Adrian noticed these moments more than anyone else. He watched how Amelia thanked the people who helped her. He noticed how she remembered small details about others. He saw how she carried herself with quiet strength, even when she knew some people questioned whether she belonged. The Alpha King had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from him. They wanted approval, influence, or a place closer to power. But Amelia wanted nothing. She had entered his kingdom with no demands and no hidden intentions. That made her impossible to understand using the rules he had always known. One afternoon, Adrian found Amelia in the palace library. She was reading about the history of the Northern Kingdom and its neighboring territories. He was surprised. "You are studying our history?" he asked. Amelia looked up and smiled softly. "If I am going to live here, I should understand the people who call this place home." Her answer stayed with him. She was not trying to change the kingdom. She was trying to understand it. Adrian sat with her and began sharing stories that were never written in official records. Stories about ordinary families, forgotten villages, and the struggles hidden behind the image of a powerful kingdom. For the first time, he found himself speaking openly without the pressure of being a ruler. Amelia listened the same way she always did. Not as someone trying to impress him. Not as someone trying to gain favor. She listened because she genuinely cared. That simple difference meant more to him than she realized. Meanwhile, the royal council continued to question Amelia's presence. They reminded Adrian that her family had once stood against his own. They warned him that emotions could cloud judgment. But Adrian began seeing the situation differently. He was not ignoring the past. He was searching for the truth behind it. That evening, he asked Amelia a question that surprised her. "If you had the chance to leave this kingdom tomorrow, would you?" Amelia became quiet. She looked toward the snowy landscape outside the window. "A place is not a home because of its walls," she answered. "It becomes a home when someone finally sees you as more than what others call you." Adrian felt those words deeply. because he understood that feeling better than anyone. The Alpha King had everything a person could desire, yet he had spent years feeling alone behind his title. And now, the enemy's bride was showing him that perhaps belonging was not something given by power. It was something created through trust. As winter continued across the kingdom, the distance between them slowly faded. But neither of them realized that the greatest challenge was still ahead. Because soon, the truth about Amelia's past would come to light, and the choice Adrian made next would decide whether old hatred would survive or finally come to an end. The quiet understanding between Amelia Whitmore and Adrian Blackthorne continued to grow, but beyond the peaceful halls of the Northern Kingdom Palace, questions about the enemy's bride were becoming louder. The people had accepted many changes under Adrian's leadership, but Amelia's presence challenged beliefs that had existed for generations. To some, she was still a reminder of an old conflict. To others, she was a mystery they did not yet understand. Amelia noticed the distance some people kept from her, but she refused to let it harden her heart. She remembered what it felt like to be judged before anyone knew her story. Because of that, she chose patience instead of resentment. One morning, while walking through the palace gardens, Amelia met a group of young werewolf children visiting from nearby villages. They looked at her with curiosity, unsure of who she was. Instead of waiting for them to approach, she smiled and spoke with them first. She listened to their stories and asked about their dreams. A simple conversation turned into a moment of connection, and several palace workers quietly witnessed it. They began seeing something different. Amelia was not trying to gain influence. She was simply being herself. Adrian heard about the moment later that day. He was not surprised, but he was grateful. He had already seen the kindness others were beginning to notice. Yet he also understood that kindness alone would not erase years of suspicion. There were still people who believed Amelia's family could not be trusted. That belief became stronger when a message arrived from the border territories. The news revealed that Amelia's former family members were attempting to rebuild their influence. Many members of the royal council immediately assumed Amelia must know more than she had admitted. The timing created doubt, and whispers began spreading through the palace once again. Adrian watched Amelia carefully when she heard the news. He expected fear or anger. Instead, he saw sadness. "They will always believe I am connected to their actions," Amelia said quietly. "No matter what I do, some people will only remember where I came from." Adrian looked at her and realized something important. Amelia was not afraid of losing comfort or status. She was afraid that people would never see the truth of who she was. "Your past does not decide your worth," Adrian told her. "Your choices do." Those words gave Amelia a small sense of peace, but Adrian knew the situation required more than reassurance. He needed to uncover the truth behind the conflict that had divided their families for so long. He began reviewing old records, searching for answers that had been hidden beneath years of assumptions and rumors. As he studied the history of both kingdoms, he discovered small details that did not match the stories he had always been told. The conflict was not as simple as everyone believed. There were missing pieces, forgotten voices, people who had been blamed without ever being heard. And at the center of it all was Amelia, a woman who had been treated as a symbol of conflict when she had only ever wanted peace. That night, Adrian stood outside the palace overlooking the snowy kingdom. He realized his decision to save Amelia had been only the beginning. Protecting her was not just about keeping her safe. It was about uncovering the truth and giving her the chance to finally be seen for who she truly was. Meanwhile, Amelia looked out at the same snow-covered lands and wondered if she could ever truly belong in a place that once considered her an enemy. Neither of them knew that the answers they were searching for would soon change everything they believed about the past, their families, and the destiny that brought them together. The truth hidden beneath years of conflict slowly began to reveal itself, and Adrian Blackthorne realized that the story he had believed his entire life was incomplete. The Alpha King spent long nights inside the royal archives, searching through old records that had been forgotten by previous generations. He was not looking for a reason to forgive Amelia Whitmore's family. He was searching for the truth because he had learned something important. A leader could not protect his kingdom by accepting every story without question. Meanwhile, Amelia continued trying to find her place inside the palace. She understood that some people still doubted her, But she refused to let their uncertainty change who she was. She helped organize supplies for families in nearby villages, and spent time listening to people who rarely had the chance to speak with someone from the royal court. The more people saw her actions, the more they began to question their old assumptions. Amelia was not the enemy they expected. She was someone who had spent her entire life trying to create peace. One afternoon, Adrian discovered an old letter hidden among the royal documents. It was written years before the conflict between the two families became impossible to repair. The letter revealed that Amelia's family had once tried to prevent the growing tension between the kingdoms. They had searched for a peaceful solution, but their efforts had been misunderstood. Someone had changed the story, allowing distrust to grow for years. Adrian read the letter several times, unable to ignore the meaning behind the words. The woman he had rescued from the snow was not connected to the hatred that had divided their people. She had been another victim of it. When Adrian shared the discovery with Amelia, she remained silent for a long moment. She had spent years believing that her family's name would always define her. She had accepted the idea that she would always carry a burden created before she was even old enough to understand it. "I never wanted to be part of anyone's conflict," Amelia said softly. "I only wanted people to stop hurting each other." Adrian looked at her and realized those words described everything about her. From the moment he found her in the snow, Amelia had never asked for revenge. She had never asked for power. She had only wanted peace. The council reacted differently to the discovery. Some were willing to reconsider what they believed. Others struggled to accept that years of judgment had been built on incomplete information. But Adrian knew that changing the kingdom would require courage. He stood before the council and explained that justice could not be based on old assumptions. A kingdom became stronger when it had the courage to admit when it was wrong. Amelia watched from a distance, surprised by how strongly Adrian defended the truth. She had expected the Alpha King to protect his reputation first. Instead, he protected what was right. That moment changed the way she saw him. He was not simply a powerful ruler. He was someone willing to challenge his own beliefs. As winter continued across the northern kingdom, the bond between Amelia and Adrian grew deeper. Neither of them spoke about destiny or the future yet. They were still learning to trust. But both understood one thing. The choice Adrian made in the snow was not just about saving a stranger. It was the beginning of a change that would reshape two kingdoms forever. The revelation inside the royal archives changed everything. But Adrian Blackthorne knew that discovering the truth was only the beginning. A single letter could change how people understood the past, but rebuilding trust between two divided sides would require more than words. It would require patience, courage, and a willingness to accept that change could not happen overnight. Amelia Whitmore understood this better than anyone. She had spent years living with the weight of a name she did not choose. Even after the truth was revealed, she still wondered if people would ever truly see her as Amelia instead of the enemy's bride. But every day inside the Northern Kingdom Palace showed her something different. Slowly, people began to notice the person behind the rumors. They saw how she treated everyone with kindness. They saw how she listened to the concerns of others. They saw that her heart had never been filled with the hatred they expected. Adrian watched these changes quietly. As the Alpha King, he had always been surrounded by loyalty based on his position. People respected his title before they understood him. But Amelia had done the opposite. She had trusted the man beneath the crown before she knew he was the ruler of the kingdom. That difference meant more to him than she realized. One evening, Adrian invited Amelia to walk through the palace gardens. The snow had begun to melt, revealing small signs of spring beneath the cold landscape. It reminded them both that even the longest winter eventually ended. "When I first found you," Adrian said, "I thought I was saving someone who needed protection." Amelia looked at him quietly. "And now?" Adrian paused before answering. "Now I understand that you were never someone who needed to be saved from weakness. You were someone who survived. Because of your strength." Amelia lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. She had spent so much of her life being told what she lacked that hearing someone recognize what she carried felt unfamiliar. "You gave me a reason to question everything I believed," Adrian continued. "And that is something I will always be grateful for." Their conversation was interrupted when a royal messenger arrived with unexpected news. Several leaders from neighboring territories wanted to meet with Adrian. They had heard about the changes happening inside the kingdom, and they wanted answers. Some were hopeful. Others were uncertain. The decision Adrian made regarding Amelia had become known throughout the land, and many were watching to see what kind of ruler he truly was. Amelia immediately worried that her presence would create more difficulties for him. "You should not have to defend me every time someone questions my place here," she said. Adrian looked at her with calm certainty. "I am not defending you because you are connected to me. I am standing with you because the truth matters." Those words stayed with Amelia. For the first time, she began believing that perhaps she did have a place in this world. Not because a king allowed it. Not because someone powerful protected her. But because she had always deserved one. Meanwhile, the kingdom prepared for a new chapter. The old divisions were beginning to fade. But the path ahead would not be simple. Adrian knew that some people would resist change. Amelia knew that some would never forget the past. Yet together, they represented something neither kingdom had seen before. A future built not on fear or old grudges, but on understanding. And as the first signs of spring reached the northern kingdom, both the Alpha King and the Omega who changed his heart realized that their greatest challenge was no longer discovering the truth. It was proving that the truth could bring people together. The arrival of spring brought new hope to the northern kingdom, but it also brought new challenges for Adrian Blackthorne and Amelia Whitmore. The truth about Amelia's past had begun to spread beyond the palace walls, and people across the kingdom were starting to question everything they once believed. For many years, the Whitmore name had represented conflict. Now they had to accept that the woman standing beside the Alpha King was not the enemy they imagined. She was someone who had been searching for peace all along. Adrian knew that changing old beliefs would take time. A kingdom could not forget years of fear with a single announcement. But he also knew that every great change began with one person willing to make the first choice. During a gathering with leaders from different territories, Adrian stood before those who had once viewed Amelia with suspicion. He did not introduce her as the enemy's bride. He did not introduce her as someone who needed protection. Instead, he introduced her as a woman whose courage had reminded him what true leadership meant. Amelia stood quietly beside him, surprised by his words. She had expected him to speak about her connection to the past. Instead, he spoke about her character. He spoke about her kindness, her patience, and her determination to choose compassion, even when the world had given her reasons not to. The moment changed how many people saw her. They began to understand that Amelia was not asking for a place in the kingdom. She had already earned one through the way she treated others. Later that day, Amelia admitted that she was still afraid. She worried that one speech could not erase every doubt. She worried that people might only accept her because Adrian stood beside her. "What if they never truly believe I belong here?" she asked. Adrian looked at her and answered softly, "Then we will show them, not with promises but with time." His words gave her comfort because they were not a guarantee of an easy path. They were a promise that she would not walk it alone. As the months passed, Amelia became a bridge between people who had spent years separated by misunderstanding. She shared stories from her own experiences and reminded others that every person carried struggles they could not see. The palace began to feel different. It was no longer only a place of authority. It became a place where people felt heard. Adrian noticed the transformation not only in the kingdom but within himself. Before Amelia entered his life, he believed being a strong Alpha King meant always having the perfect answer. He believed he had to carry every burden alone. But Amelia taught him that strength could also be found in listening, learning, and admitting when something needed to change. One evening, Adrian and Amelia returned to the snowy valley where they first met. The landscape had changed. The harsh winter had faded, and new life had begun to appear beneath the snow. Amelia looked around quietly, remembering the moment when she thought she had been forgotten by the world. "I never imagined I would return here," she said. Adrian smiled. "Neither did I." They both understood that their story had started with a simple choice. A choice to help. A choice to trust. A choice to see a person instead of a label. But as they looked toward the future, they knew their journey was not only about them. It was about proving that two worlds once separated by fear could finally stand together. The Alpha King had chosen compassion when everyone expected judgment. And the Omega who was once abandoned had become the reason an entire kingdom learned how to hope again. The Northern Kingdom had changed in ways that few people could have imagined. What once stood as a place divided by old fears and forgotten wounds was slowly becoming a symbol of understanding. At the center of that transformation were two people who had never expected their paths to cross. Adrian Blackthorne, the Alpha King, had once believed that protecting his kingdom meant keeping every possible threat away. Amelia Whitmore, the Omega who had been abandoned in the snow, had once believed she would always be judged by a name she did not choose. Together, they had discovered something neither of them expected. A kingdom could heal when someone was brave enough to begin. As time passed, Amelia found herself becoming more involved in the lives of the people around her. She visited villages beyond the palace and listened to families who had spent years feeling forgotten. She understood their worries because she had known what it felt like to have no one. Hear her voice. Her presence reminded people that leadership was not only about making decisions from a throne. It was also about understanding the hearts of those who lived beneath it. Adrian watched her from a distance during one of these visits. He saw how people who were once uncertain now welcomed her with genuine smiles. He saw how children approached her without fear and how elders spoke to her with respect. The woman who had arrived as a stranger had become someone the kingdom trusted. Yet Amelia still carried a quiet doubt inside her. She had gained acceptance, but she wondered if she had truly found a place where she belonged. One evening, she shared her thoughts with Adrian while they walked through the palace gardens. "Sometimes I still remember that night in the snow," she said. "I remember thinking my story was already over." Adrian looked at her with understanding. But it was not the end. It was the moment everything changed. Amelia smiled softly. "Because you chose to help me." Adrian shook his head. "Because you showed me why that choice mattered." His answer surprised her. She had always believed Adrian saved her, but he believed she had changed him just as much. Their connection had never been built on power or titles. It had grown through trust, honesty, and the simple moments when they allowed each other to be seen. Meanwhile, the leaders of the neighboring territories began discussing a new alliance. For generations, their relationships had been shaped by suspicion. Now they were looking toward cooperation. Many credited Adrian's decision to welcome Amelia into his kingdom as the beginning of this change. They saw that forgiveness did not erase the past. It created a chance to build something better. Amelia knew the road ahead would still have challenges. There would always be people who remembered the old conflicts. There would always be moments when rebuilding trust required patience. But she no longer faced those moments alone. She had found a place where she was valued not because of what she represented, but because of who she was. Adrian had gained something he never expected as a king. He had gained someone who reminded him that compassion was not a weakness. It was a strength that could unite people. As the seasons changed and the Northern Kingdom welcomed a new era, the bond between the Alpha King and the Omega who changed his heart became a story shared throughout the land. It was a story about a choice made in the snow, a kindness that crossed old boundaries, and a reminder that sometimes the person we are taught to fear is the person who helps us discover who we truly are. Years had passed since the night when Adrian Blackthorne found Amelia Whitmore beneath the winter sky. Yet the memory remained as clear as the first snowfall of every new season. The valley where their story began was no longer a place of loneliness and uncertainty. It had become a symbol of a choice that changed the future of two kingdoms. The Northern Kingdom had grown stronger, not because it had conquered others, but because it had learned the value of understanding. Adrian often returned to that valley with Amelia, remembering the moment when he had been forced to decide what kind of leader he truly wanted to be. At the time, everyone expected him to see only an enemy. They expected him to follow the path written by old grudges and forgotten anger. But he had chosen something different. He had chosen compassion. And that choice had changed everything. Amelia had also changed. The woman who once believed she would always be defined by her family's name had become someone who inspired countless others. She was no longer known as the enemy's bride. She was known as the Omega who reminded an entire kingdom that kindness could be powerful. She had never gained respect by demanding it. She had earned it by showing patience, courage, and a heart that refused to become cold. One spring morning, Adrian and Amelia stood together overlooking the lands that connected their kingdoms. The fields were beginning to bloom. And the same world that once felt divided now looked full of possibility. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had continued past that valley? Amelia asked softly. Adrian smiled as he looked toward the horizon. I have wondered many times. And what do you think? She asked. He answered after a moment of silence. I think I would have remained a king who protected a kingdom, but I would never have become a man who truly understood it. Amelia looked at him with a gentle smile. She knew exactly what he meant. Before they met, Adrian carried the weight of leadership alone. He believed strength meant having no doubts and showing no uncertainty. But she had shown him that true strength was not about standing above others. It was about standing beside them. Their journey was remembered throughout the lands, not because of power or royal titles, but because of the lesson it carried. People told the story of the Alpha King who discovered that mercy was not weakness. They told the story of the Omega who proved that a person's worth was never decided by how others judged them. They told the story of two people who found hope in a place where everyone expected only separation. The world they built together was not perfect. Challenges still appeared. Differences still existed. But they faced them with the same belief that brought them together from the beginning. Every person deserved to be seen. Every voice deserved to be heard. Every heart deserved a chance. Years after that first winter night, Adrian still remembered the simple decision he made in the snow. It was not a decision made for power. It was not a decision made for recognition. It was simply a choice to help someone who needed kindness. And that choice became the foundation of a future neither kingdom had imagined. Because sometimes destiny does not arrive with a grand announcement. Sometimes it appears quietly in a single moment when one person chooses compassion over fear. And for the Alpha King and the Omega who changed his heart, that one choice became the beginning of everything.